Hello everybody, Demon Red Mist here. So yeah, I am doing the RBJ guide for Le Mans now. Right, I've done one lap warm up. I would just want to quickly mention as well, around this particular track, I haven't got my setup done. I haven't got my setup finalised or anything like that. But there is still a specific way to drive around this track. Some of the gears that I might be in for a corner may change differently depending on my setup, but what I'm going to hopefully show you here is effectively how to get around this track with A, not going off, and B, also how to look after your tyres. Now, in qualifying, there's a different way to drive the car in qualifying compared to the race. If you drive in the race the same way that you can drive it in qualifying, you will destroy your tyres. But there's one tiny little thing you can do that'll mean you won't destroy your tyres as much anyway, but I'll get on to that. I'll quickly show you the setup that I'm going to be using for this particular run at the moment. Only thing that's been changed on here is that's been dropped by 0.20. The aeros, I'm on a 565 1120. I'm actually thinking that's probably going to be a little too low. I would not recommend as low downforce as you can go around this track. Even though, yes, there is one hell of a long straight that you want some speed on, the corners are the more important part around this track. If you can't get through the corners, the straight's going to be of no benefit to you. Now, I have got quite a long gear ratio on at the moment. It's just set to the standard 217 mile an hour, but I still need to test that in slipstream and adjust my gears accordingly. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and try and do 2 laps if I can. The first lap with sort of a qualifying sort of I was going to say qualifying mentality, kind of. I'm going to go the wrong way though, because I don't want to have to do a whole lap to start the first lap. Yeah, so a bit of a qualifying mentality to it. The second lap with more of a racing head-on, shall we say. Okay, so we'll start straight away. So I'm going to do 2 laps at speed, and then I'll do corner by corner guide, and then I'll probably do 1 lap after that. Okay, heading up to turn 1, it's such an easy corner. Turn 1 is flat out, but turn 2, be on the brakes straight after you've got through this corner. By being on the brakes early, you can take much more speed through both of these corners. Don't necessarily have to think about trying to overtake anybody down here, by the way, because if you do, they're only going to come past you on the straight. Brake early, 1 downshift, and then you can be flat out through here. Avoid that curb on the right though, it'll want to spin you. This corner should be absolutely flat out, easy, and then we're on to the long straight. Couple of things about this long straight. Try and stay as straight as possible, don't go weaving all over the place, but also there is a feature to this particular straight, and that is this left lane on the first part of the straight is nice and smooth. The right side is a little bit more bumpy, not a lot, but a little. And now on this part of the straight, which is past what would be the first chicane, the left side is smooth, sorry, the right side is smooth, but the left side is a little bit more bumpy. Not a lot, just a little. So something to think about. Do you want the smoother part of the road or the bumpier part? But try and keep your steering wheel as straight as possible with everything you do down here. Even this kink, approaching it from the left and putting a tiny amount of steering on is more beneficial for you than being on the right and having to steer more. We're going to brake at the start of the curve on the right hand side coming up. And do not go over the white line on the left. If you go over the white line on the left in the braking zone, you're going to lose grip, it's dirty there. On the exit of the corner, keep it in a straight line for the fastest possible speed. And down here again, minimal steering to get around these kinks. The straighter the wheel, the faster you go. Now we're into a beautiful part of the track. We don't have to slow down for this first part, but then we do have to be hard on the brakes at the end of the curve on the right, so that we can comfortably make the left-hander. Don't brake too late for this corner. There is nothing to be gained by braking late. Okay, now we're into the section that really counts, and this is where you can drive it differently in qualifying than you should in the race. You can push it more through here in qualifying, potentially, depending on your aero setup, flat out. Oh, it won't make it with these wings. Bollocks. Bollocks, bollocks, bollocks. Right, let me go back. Right, okay. No, it won't make it with those wings. So, not flat out, unless you're on higher wings. If you are on higher wings, 650 or above, you can go through this section pretty much absolutely flat out. Right? But, in race mode, you wouldn't want to. I'm just going to have to go back and get up to speed a little bit. Okay, so now I know that it's not flat out. Okay, so for the right-hander coming up, what you want to do is give it a little lift. You don't need to go down a gear, you just need to do a little lift and approach it on the left-hand side of the track. So a lift at the green AstroTurf on the left. Now we can be flat out here and flat out again, but now we're going to have to lift. Downshift 1, maybe on the lower wing, turn in early. Make sure you get close to that curb on the left. The higher the wing, the faster you can go through that section. Here, don't brake late. If you brake at the curb, it's too late. There's a bit of what looks like a traffic light going over the road you can use as a bit of a guide, and then don't brake too much. It's a long track, but it's not a difficult track. Okay, now on a bit more of a race mode. Most of the track is exactly the same, but if you've got cars around you, remember you're going to have to brake a little bit earlier. As soon as you round that right kink, get on the brakes. As I mentioned, from here to the straight, there's no point overtaking. Little dab of brake, down one gear, and then flat out, and still avoid that curb on the right. If you don't, it will spin you. In race mode, this corner, still flat out. But if you do start running wide because of tyre wear, you might need a tiny little lift. This straight is going to be massively important in the race. There's potentially going to be a lot of cars slipstreaming each other. Please, 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 have your radar on and do not give it any of these sort of mental dramatic moves. If you're going to move from one side of the track to the other, you better fucking make sure there is not a car next to you. Because if you don't, and you hit them, and you cause carnage, good chance you're going to end up getting reported and getting a penalty. You're much better off straight lines, slipstreaming, use your radar to see if you've got a gap to pull out of a slipstream to attempt an overtake. Okay, in a normal race situation, the right hand corner that we're coming up to down here, you want to approach it on the left and you brake at the start of the curb. If you do happen to find yourself on the right hand side, again, brake on at the start of the curb, but brake much more. Stay on the brakes all the way to the corner to keep that tight line. If you have one car in front of you, you cannot brake at the start of the curb. You have to brake earlier. If you've got two in front of you, earlier again. 3, earlier again. 4, earlier again. 14, brake early. Bear that in mind. Right, this corner in the race, you can still go around this corner at full speed, but again, as soon as you round it, end of the curb, hard on the brakes. No point taking risks there. I don't want to be seeing people going off in some of these fast, at the end of some of these fast straights. Brake nice and early for this corner. Do not end up in the gravel or in the wall there. Now this is the bit that's different in the race. In the race, to look after your tyres, and when your tyres start wearing, every single one of these corners, do a little lift. Even if you could do it flat out, do a little lift, it'll save your tyre. AstroTurf on the left, little lift. Back on the power, get ready, little lift, saves the tyres, little lift, saves the tyres, little lift, don't have to drop it down a gear. Now, little lift, drop it to fourth, throw it round the corner, much smoother, much better for your tyres. Trust me, you'll get an extra lap out of them. Stanchion on the top right, you can brake there or just after, and then speed up through these corners, but then get hard on the brakes because you don't want to be touching that red sausage curb. And there we go. Okay, so there's a couple of frantic laps, but to be honest, those little lifts through that curvy section, it makes a massive difference to your tyre life, right? And that can be so key, so crucial. Okay, I'm going to go through corner by corner now. Okay, turn 1 is flat out, as I've mentioned. The aim with turn 1 is to come around the corner flat out, and then as soon as you are around the corner and the curb starts straightening up just here, be on the brakes, right? The further you go into this little straight, the slower you're going to be through these corners. And this is a set of corners where so often you'll see people go flying off into the gravel straight ahead, or hitting people into the gravel straight ahead because they simply just brake way too late. Bear this in mind. If you overtake 4 cars into this corner, what are they going to do on the straight? They're going to come flying past you with shitloads of slipstream. So where's the point in attempting it? If you're side by side with somebody coming up here, then fair enough, go for it, no problem. But just have a think. Okay, so beyond the brakes here, when the curb starts going straight, if you can, keep over to the right hand side of the track. Go on, tyres. And then gradually let off the brakes. I'm taking these corners in second gear and I'm turning in around about where this total sign is on the right. I like to take an early-ish entry into these corners. By braking where I do, I actually sort of stretch this chicane. Instead of it being a tight left and a tight right, it's kind of like a medium speed left and a medium speed right. There's no chicane to it really. So a nice early turn in, get a couple of wheels on the curb, and as you see in this position, this now doesn't really look like that much of a chicane. It's just a little left and a little right. I can hold second gear, little lift over the apex, back on the power, and absolutely floor it. Those 3 corners are so simple, no one should ever be crashing there on their own anyway. And you shouldn't really be punting into people, but I would hope to not see any of that in the DGT race. Okay, heading down the hill, it couldn't be much easier, absolutely flat out here. Try and stay on the racing line if you can, which is now on the right hand side of the track. And what I tend to do is I like to try and get myself into this sort of position where the grass is. There isn't any particular marker for when I apply a little bit of brake and do my downshift. Basically, I want to do my little bit of brake and my downshift before I turn in. That's my goal, and that's what your goal should be as well. If you don't do the downshift, you don't get the turn in. So you need to be, I think it's 4th gear on this gear ratio I'm in, 4th gear, approaching this corner, downshift once and around the corner. If you happen to be in 5th, downshift to 4th. That downshift gives you the turn in. Now the turning point is around about the service road on the right here. So we've done the downshift, we can start turning in, and it's at this point where if you haven't done the downshift, you'll start understeering and you'll start running wide. But if you have done the downshift, the car's going to turn in for you and you can hug this apex curb and be absolutely full throttle. and then that opens up this corner as well. And like I say, this curb on the right hand side, if you get on that, chances are you're going to end up facing the wrong direction. Avoid that curb at all costs. So as I said, we're absolutely flat out. We're going to want to let the car run out towards the left, but try and avoid dipping a wheel onto the curb or the grass and the mud, because it will pull you off the track. In this car, as I've said, this corner is absolutely flat out. In normal cars, normal race cars, quite often what you might have to do is a lift, a shift and turn. But in this car, absolutely flat out. Turning point is up to yourself. Personally, I'm turning in, I would guess, around about here. But again, there isn't any particular marker. I just do this one on feel. So find yourself some kind of turning point, and that's a bit vague, and see if you cut the corner, run wide. But the aim is to get the right hand wheels all over the apex curb. So you want to be, if you can, get it into this kind of position. You can then let the car run over to the left, up to the curb. Now if you find that you are hitting the apex curb but still running wide on the exit of the corner, you're turning in too soon. If you're turning in and getting nowhere near the apex curb but making the exit, you're turning in way too late and going too slow. But if you're turning in and getting nowhere near the apex curb and running wide, you're going way too fast and turning in too late. So that fine line is, when you turn in at the right point, you will clip that apex curb and your left wheels will clip this curb on the exit. Okay, then as I said, obviously it's absolutely flat out all the way down the straight. Guys, what I would say as well is, in any of the practice races that go on around here, check your gears for slipstreams. It will be extremely powerful around this track. Now, as I said, this bit is not the most difficult. It may seem a little bit boring, but when there's a lot of cars around you, it is not going to be boring. And what I will say is, if you've got 3 cars side by side in front of you, chances are you're not getting past. Might not even be worth doing it. That's where bump drafting can come in very useful. Pick one of the drivers, bump draft him, make him go faster, you go faster, you get past 2 cars. Rather than, oh, let's go 4 wide, oh shit, we've all crashed. Okay, I've just been past what I would call the warning sign. This long straight is so easy to get lost on, but the warning sign that the corner is coming up soon is the kink. Once you've gone round the kink, you should be thinking, and the kink is back there by the way, you should be thinking there's a corner coming in a moment, and you should be getting ready for it, okay? Another telltale sign is there's big fucking cranes over there and a big fucking brake marker board there. 300 metres, 200 metres. So there are signs to say there's a corner coming, 100 metres. Now, what I would say is, if I was approaching this corner and I had, say, 6 cars in front of me, I would probably be looking at starting to apply the brakes around about this area. The start of the curb we can see ahead of us next to that marshal waving the green flag. That would be the braking point if I'm all on my own. But if I've got cars in front of me, that is not the braking point. There's cars in the way. So if you've got cars in front of you, please guys, be prepared to brake early, okay? Don't brake way too soon. That's what the test races are for, to find out how early you may need to brake if you are in traffic, okay? I would love it if through the course of the DGT race here next week, if we don't see a single person either A, go off at this corner all on their own, or B, don't hit anybody else off at this corner. I would love to see that. Okay, so anyway, when you are on your own, approach from the left hand side. At the start of the curb, we apply the brakes and we apply them hard, right? Because you've got to get the car slowed down from around about 200 mile an hour. In slipstream, it'll be a lot more than that. and down the gears. We'll let the car run over towards the left hand side, but this is the white line that I'm saying do not get your left wheels on. Right? If you are getting yourself into this kind of position and you're ending up near the gravel ahead of us, it's because you're in this position. You've got your left tyres on a very dirty part of tarmac. Stay to the right of this white line for better braking. So to be fair, if you're braking at the start of the curb that I mentioned that's behind us and running your tyres over the left hand side of this white line, chances are you are getting fully out of shape into this corner, and you may think that braking point's too late. It's not. The braking point's right, your positioning's wrong. Anyway, try and stay as close to the white line as we can. Don't turn in too soon for this corner. First gear it's going to be for most people, clip the apex and then absolutely nail the throttle on the exit for the straightest run possible towards the next corners. Oh, excuse me. Now, as I mentioned down here, try and keep very minimal steering inputs, and bear in mind, if you have got a car next to you, stick to your lane, okay? There's no point weaving and shit like that if the car is next to you. Okay, on approach to this corner, just gone past the AstroTurf that's next to us, where on occasion I have said before you may need to do a lift or whatever, but this car you don't need to, okay? If you have a car next to you here, you can't go for the apex of this right kink. You're going to have to stay more in the left lane, and you're going to have to brake extremely hard to get slowed down for the corner. You may even have to hit the brakes at the start of the curb, not the end of the curb. But if you're all on your own in an ideal world, or an ideal situation, they'd be a bit lonely being on the world all on your own, we would be approaching in this position, clip the apex, and then as we get to the end of this curb we hit the brakes, and we hit them hard, because we only have a short distance to get from potentially 195-ish mile an hour down to about 70. Right, so it's a short distance, so we hit the brakes hard and try and keep the car in as straight a line as possible. If you find yourself over on the left hand side of the track here, you're going in either way too fast, or you're not turning enough, or you're braking too late. Okay, again, if you've got cars in front of you, you're going to have to brake a little bit earlier. If I was following one car through this corner, I would lift before the curb on the right and then brake at the curb. If I had two cars, then I would lift way before the curb and apply the brake at the start of the curb. So be prepared to slow down earlier. So we hit the brakes hard and we stay on those brakes until we're in second gear and we can make this corner. Turning point just after the curb on the right we've just gone past, and just try and clip the apex curb and then let the car run out towards the exit curb, and then we're absolutely flat out again. This corner is an absolute evil little bitch, but I have just spotted something that'll help, and hopefully now that I've spotted it, to be honest I've never seen that it was there, but now that I've spotted it peripherally, that's two words put together, peripherally and preferably, I will be able to see that there's a 50 metre marker board. That 50 metre marker board is the braking point for this corner. If you brake later than that, you're going to struggle round this corner, and you're going to struggle a lot. So when I do the next hot lap in a moment, keep an eye out for that. So 50 metre marker board, we're going to hit the brakes. Don't take too much curb here, because this one is very serrated. It's going to put you all out of shape, so you want to be just off it. And again, don't turn in too soon, but also don't turn in too late for this corner. End of the curb, clip the apex, and avoid the curb and wall on the left. By braking at the 50 metre marker board for that corner, you should never, in this car, miss the corner, okay? And then we're absolutely flat out towards the Porsche curves. And I must admit, I absolutely love this next, 4, 5, 6 corners. They're absolutely brilliant corners, especially in things like LMP1 cars and these cars. Right, as I mentioned, if you've got higher aeros like 600, 650, something like that, then you can probably get through the next 1, 2, 3, 4 corners absolutely flat out, and then drop it down one gear for the tight left that will be coming up in 5 corners time. In a race situation though, don't do that. Although yes, the car can do it, it will only do it for a couple of laps. Whereas what you're probably going to want is for it to be able to do it for 3 or 4 laps. If you want it to be able to do it for 3 or 4 laps, you're probably going to need a lot more aeros, and then you're going to get left behind on the straight. So the better way to do it is to apply that little lift before you turn in on each corner. It will help you with the turn in, and it will put your car in a better position with less steering angle on to then drive through the corner. In a qualifying situation though, you don't have to give a shit about your tyres, so go for it if you dare. Okay, on approach to the right hander, we want to approach on the left hand side. Now there is a patch of AstroTurf coming up. You may not have seen it with how quick we were going. It's coming up now. So just here on the left, this patch of AstroTurf is a very handily positioned patch of AstroTurf. You can use that to time your lift on the way into this corner. You can also use that as the warning sign that there's a fucking corner coming, knobhead. So again, it can help you not go off at this corner. As your tyres begin to wear though, bear in mind you are at higher risk of understeering in this corner, and if you are on the right hand side of the track on approach to this corner, there is a good chance you are going to have to drop down a gear to get around this right hander. Approaching on the right part of the circuit, or the correct part of the circuit, you should not need to downshift. So we would be approaching in 5th gear, do a little lift in race situation and turn in. I mean, just look how dirty this track is on the left there. You do not want to be getting onto that. If you do, you're going straight on. Now the aim for this corner is to hug the apex curb all the way around. If you find that you are not anywhere near this apex curb, get off the throttle, apply the brakes a little bit if you need to, and just recover the car. Anywhere away from this apex curb will result in you effectively not going off in the gravel necessarily that we can see in front of us, but sort of just over to the right is a lamppost we can kind of see. You'll end up going off the track over there. So the aim is to hug this apex all the way around, and that's where the lift comes in, right? So if you are miles away from the apex, you're going to end up in the gravel now in front of us. Now we want to keep tight around that right hander so that we can position ourselves towards the right hand side of the circuit for this left hand corner coming up. Again, towards the end of the grass is about our turning point, so we're at there, we can do a little lift, we can turn in, we can be back on the power, we don't have to apply as much steering, and that helps with the tyres. Let the car run over towards the curb, and then before the end of the curb, little lift, turn in, back on the power, clip the apex curb. This corner tightens up around it, so doing a lift here really helps, and it means that you can hug the curb on the right hand side, and then we're into the trickier corner of the lot, right? The left-hander that is coming up, I've mentioned it on a previous video around this particular track. The key to this corner is getting your left wheels over the apex curb with your car at the right speed. If your car's at the right speed but the curb is actually on the left of you, you're running wide. If your car is at the right speed and your left tyres are over the apex curb, chances are you're not going to run wide. In these cars, if you're flat out or in 5th gear heading towards this corner, you need to drop it down a gear. This car, with slightly higher aeros than I'm on, can cope with staying flat out, knocking it down a gear and turning in. It is that capable. But as the tyres start to wear, you would need to incorporate a lift and a shift instead of a stay flat out and shift. So be prepared on the exit of this right hander to do a tiny little lift, knock it down to 4th gear, turn in early-ish, and then get the left-hand wheels over this yellow and blue curb. By doing that, you can straddle this curb and you will find yourself exiting in this position rather than thinking, fucking hell, look at that beautiful beach on the right. So a much better way to approach the corner, and hopefully I'll be able to show you that again in a moment. We've got a very fast chicane coming up. Nothing really to tell you about here, just go flat out through it. And then we're into the final 4 corners, the final chicanes. And it will be tempting, very tempting, to attack and overtake. Now, as I was driving around, I was mentioning about a sort of traffic light system. That's not where I'm braking, in all honesty, but looking forward, there is not a lot there that you can use as a braking point. The start of the curb next to the pit entry is too late. If you're braking there, you might make the corner once, but when your tyres wear, you ain't making it again. So kind of need to work a braking point between this light section and the start of that curb, somewhere about halfway between. But again, this is a corner where if you're braking too late, you're going to be braking hard, and the first part of this chicane is actually not a slow corner. It can be done in 3rd gear, I think, maybe 2nd, but it can be done at quite a high speed. So we want to be on the brakes, then we can get off the brakes, and then we can turn in fairly early. God, I don't like cold tyres. And do what we did with the tyre to left that we've just gone round, straddle the curbs. Get your left wheels over the curb and straighten these up a bit, then the right wheel over the curb, and then once you're through this corner, you've got to be on the brakes to get it down to potentially 1st gear. Use a bit of the apex curb to open up this right-hander, and then do not, there's 3 phases to this curb, do not get too much on the middle phase or the red. You got a nice flat bit next to the white line, then it's angled, that's the middle phase, and then it's red. You can use the middle phase, but if you touch the red, chances are you're gonna spin. So this is kind of the position we want to be heading in, so we can then let the car run wide. If you're spinning at this corner, it'll be either A, you're using too much curb, B, you're using too much curb and too much steering lock, or C, you're not using too much curb, but you are using too much steering lock. So remember what I said about Red Bull Ring, if you're going to be going on the power, come off the steering. Okay, and then it's a straight shot to the start finish line. Okay, right, I am going to go and do 2 laps now. At a slightly higher speed. The first one using the racing line. I'll tell you what I'm going to do actually as well. I'm going to up my wings a little bit. Yeah, the first one using the racing line, and the second one being off the racing line, because I know I have shown that a bit recently. What did I just go, how many did I just go up then? I can't remember. I think it was 45. I could be wrong. Okay, yeah, so I'll do a lap on the racing line and then a lap off the racing line to show how differently the braking will be. Now the reason why I've gone with slightly higher wing is hopefully I'll have more grip through the Porsche curves and I'll be able to show you about the little lifts slightly better. I wonder why you have traction control in reverse. Okay. So we're looking at hitting the brakes as soon as we are around turn 1. Dab a brake down 1, turn it in, full throttle, avoid the curb. Avoid the gravel, flat out. Now I didn't see what speed I was getting to on the previous run, I think it was somewhere 195-ish, maybe a little more. So you may see what difference in top speed the slight change of aeros has got. But what I would say is, if you're slipstreaming, being a couple of mile an hour down ain't going to make a difference, because if you're slipstreaming, you're going to get all of that back and more. Okay, so here comes the kink letting you know, get ready, because there's a fucking corner coming soon. So now we should be aware, we should be thinking, right, the corner's on its way, where am I going to position? So brake at the start of the curb. And I'm on the power before I actually exit the corner, because I haven't braked too late. Okay, keep the car nice and straight on the straights, open up the curves, so only a tiny little bit of steering. So when I do the next lap around here, compare how much steering angle I put on through those two tiny kinks. Okay, flat out through the first part, on the brakes, end of the curb. End of the curve on the right, turn in point, look for that 50-metre marker board. So brake slightly before it actually makes the corner lovely. So there we go, should never be going off there now. Okay, so through here I am going to do the tiny little lifts. So look for the Astro on the left. There it is, lift, turn in, lift, turn in. Still a bit of tyre squeal, but it's not as bad. Lift, turn in, lift, bit of a bigger lift. Careful on that curb, downshift, curb, left tyres all over it. Makes the corner. Now we go flat out. Now we're going on judgment a little bit. Look out for the gantry. Here it comes. There's the gantry halfway. Hit the brakes. I'm going to go to second, but that's fine. I can go back up to third. Then we hit the brakes. Use the curb. Don't use the curb. Straighten the wheel and go. Now we're going to go off the racing line. Whether it be for attacking or defending, I'm going to go off the racing line on this bit, but then I'm going to go on the inside. So you would have to turn more, but still hit the brakes. But I'm going to go up the inside here. I'm going to have to slow it down more, because I'm going to have to be careful of cars next to me. So it can still be done. This would be off the racing line, side by side down here, should be no problem. But if you do find yourself on the inside here, a little bit more of the brakes, still downshift, but then leave space, but lift. If you don't lift, you might run wide. If you're up the inside here, you're going to need to lift and maybe even brake and even downshift to make the corner. But having said that, why would you want to be up the inside unless somebody is going slow? You might as well wait until after the corner and then breeze past them. Okay, so now I'm going to approach the right-hander at the end of this very long straight, off the racing line. Now I could brake at the point I'm going to and then stay to the right, but I've kind of already shown that. What I'm going to do this time is brake at the right point, but let the car go over to the left and let the left-hand wheels go over the white line to see what it's going to do. Now I will say, if you are on excuse me, the right hand side of the track at this right hander, then you should be staying tight to the right hand side curb. You should not be moving over to the left, so you should not be doing what I'm doing here. But I just want to show that you can still brake at the start of the curb. Now the car's slippery, so I've still made the corner, but because I had my two tyres over the white line, the car was wiggling, it was shaking, and if you're on a wheel, you'll really start feeling that. Okay, for these kinks, how much more steering angle do I need? Only a tiny little bit more there, but it's still more. And again, a tiny bit more, but it's still more. More is more wear. Okay, up the inside here, can we do it flat out? Oh, nearly, just. I would recommend lifting at the start of the curve, as I said. 50-metre braking still, but stay on the brakes until you're round properly getting round the corner. Okay, Porsche curves, this bit's horrible if you're on the dirty side of the track. If you do not downshift, you will go straight on, okay? So if you are approaching on the right hand side of the track, we're still going to try and keep an eye out for that AstroTurf. Harder to see though, so we're on the brakes, we're downshifting, we hug this curb, but now we've still got a car on the left, so we're going to have to lift, otherwise we're just going to hit the wall. Can't turn in if there's a car on the left, but we'd end up in this position. But if the car is still on the left, now we're going to have to brake and downshift to stay on the road. If you don't brake and downshift, you're not getting around that corner. Okay, dirty side of the track, up the inside, into the final corners. You have to slow it down a lot more because you might need to leave space. And then this corner, oh, it's horrible here. It really is, because you can end up all out of shape. But it can be done as long as you slow it down. So there we go. Easy stuff, guys. Easy stuff. Right. Done. Hopefully those hints and tips will help. If not, oh well. I'm sure it'll help somebody. Have a great weekend, folks, and make sure you check out Dynamic GT League's YouTube channel for the race footage from the race on Thursday from Brazil. And then next weekend for the race footage of this race, which is coming up on Thursday. Also, Tuesday night, check out I'll Tell You What.tv on YouTube, the unofficial F1 podcast, or an unofficial F1 podcast, where we'll be talking a little bit about the Bahrain race again, but also the Chinese Grand Prix coming up. Alright, have a good one, folks, and I shall see you again soon.